Hello, and welcome to today's webinar presenting features and improvements included in the latest Genesis R&D Foods version 11.5. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by my colleague Ben. I'll tell you about the new features, and Ben will show you where to find them in Genesis. A little background information on ESHA. ESHA was founded in 1981 as the first comprehensive nutrition analysis software solution. Today, we have a variety of software products, services, and databases to meet industry formulation and labeling needs. ESHA solutions include Genesis R&D Foods software, which we'll be showing today, the Genesis R&D supplement software, the food processor nutrition and diet analysis software, and our consulting services, which provides expertise in training, labeling services, and much more. Genesis R&D Food was introduced in 1991 and is designed to help you manage industry processes and challenges and comply with federal labeling requirements. Genesis serves as a powerful tool to help you with product development, formulation and menu analysis, reporting and documentation, and regulatory compliance. Genesis version 11.5 was made available at the beginning of May. As always, updates are automatically available to customers with their current software maintenance and support. If you have any questions regarding the status of your account and to make sure information and updates are reaching the correct personnel, please contact our sales team. We have 2 webinars coming up in June that will explore some of today's topics in more depth. On June 13th, we'll present more information on the composite ingredient feature and discuss calorie ranges as well as additional menu labeling topics in more detail. On June 27th, we'll share more information on Mexico's labeling regulations and demonstrate the Mexico label and Mexico front of pack options in Genesis. And then on July 11th, we'll cover the transition of Canadian labels from the 2003 to the 2016 format. And you can register for those webinars at the ESHA website. Look for the News and Events tab. As always, this webinar is being recorded, so you can refer to this content later. You can find an archive of all past webinars on the ESHA website and access those in the eLearning Center page. During the webinar, please send in any questions you have at any time. No need to wait until the end. If you have a question right now, go ahead and send it in. We have support standing by to respond to as many questions as possible. And if for some reason we run out of time or need to research a question that you send in, we'll follow up with you after the webinar. Today we'll be highlighting composite ingredients, calorie ranges on the menu label report, Mexico front of pack labels, nutrient content claims for Mexico, reference amounts for nutrient content claims, sorting ingredients and less than the 2% statement by weight. We'll be adding specific sugar alcohols to labels and showing you the ESHA eLearning Center, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A. A quick FDA regulatory update. On May 3rd, the FDA announced the official extension of the compliance dates. Final compliance dates for the 2016 formatted U.S. label and revised RAC rules are January 1st, 2020 for companies with $10 million or more in annual food sales, and January 1st, 2021 for companies with less than $10 million in annual food sales. And you can find archived ESHA webinars that speak to specific 2016 labeling topics and how to transition to the 2016 labels with Genesis. Just a reminder that Genesis includes both the 1990 and 2016 label formats. So wherever you are at in the transitional stages, Genesis supports your labeling needs. For Genesis 11.5, we'll begin with a couple of features that help address some of the needs of the menu labeling requirements. Note that the compliance date for U.S. menu labeling regulations was May 7th of this year. And the composite ingredient is a new feature. It allows you to average the nutritional data of multiple ingredients. This could be several single ingredient items, like varieties of apples, or if you have a number of suppliers for the same type of food item and want to create an averaged item, you could use the composite ingredient feature to do so. This feature can be applied to menu labeling, general food product analysis, and more generically as a comparison tool. When you make selections, Genesis brings in equal amounts of each ingredient and shows 100 grams of your newly created composite ingredient. So just a couple examples of how this could be used. If you want to create an average flour from multiple sources, you could create a composite ingredient. Or say I have 3 suppliers of hamburger buns, I can use the composite ingredient feature to create one average bun, as you see on the slide here. And then I could use that composite ingredient hamburger bun to build my sandwich recipes. Another example, perhaps you created a recipe and want to see how that compares with several others of the same type of food in the database, or if you have only one supplier for an ingredient but we're wondering how it checks out nutritionally to other brands, you can use the composite ingredient feature as a comparison tool. The composite ingredient includes a spreadsheet report so you can review the detail of the data from your separate items as well as the totals per 100 grams. Ben, would you show us the composite ingredient feature in Genesis, please?
Absolutely. So we're going to switch over into the Genesis software now. So within our drop-down menus, either new or open on that home tab, we used to have 4 items, now we've got 5. So you have recipe, ingredient, advanced labels, and the menu label as existing ones. Though for 11.5, I don't think we've mentioned it yet, the food menu was renamed to menu label. So same item, but different name. And now we've got that new 5th item, which is the composite ingredient. From a functional standpoint, the composite ingredient really is kind of a hybrid between a recipe and an ingredient. Go ahead and create a new one here so we can see that process. Let's call it webinar composite. I'm going to do, as Alicia kind of pointed out, the bun example here, so we'll do that. So from a view standpoint, it looks very similar to what you would see for a recipe, and it doesn't have that top area with the information of the recipe. But you're going to search for your items for your composite ingredient and then add them in. So if I search for webinar, because I created a few ingredients that were specific for this example, I've got some hamburger buns here. You can either select them one at a time. So I search for one, select it, and it adds that item into my composite. Or if I search for webinar again, I can multi-select. So if I either Control A to select all, or select the item, hold Shift, and select the multi-select in there, just your normal natural Windows multi-select functions. We can then click select down here and it'll add all of those in all at one time. So you've got all of those items in now, and now we've got 5 separate buns from 5 separate suppliers that are all within our composite ingredient. The quantity is always going to be, and the amount are always going to be factored based on how many ingredients you have inside of your composite. If you have 2, then it's going to be 50-50. If you have 5, then as you see the example here, it's going to be 20 each. So it's an exact percentage for every single one of them. For a couple of pieces outside of this, if we go into the edit composite ingredient area here, it just says edit because composite ingredient is a little long. We can change the name again, just like any other item, use our common name or user code. Nutrients we can look at, though we do have a report that we'll look at as well, so we don't necessarily have to use this nutrients tab. Yields and measures, groups, notes, attachments, all just like any normal ingredient or recipe. And then the ingredient statement area is an important piece to this too, and the ingredient statement area is going to work exactly like a standard ingredient. So you're going to enter in any sub ingredients that you would have there, or put any alternate name in you would like for this ingredient. It doesn't pull through from any of the ingredients you've added in because we don't want to assume which one you'd want to use or any sort of hybrid there. So you can enter in that ingredient statement here. And then, like I said, we've got a couple other different windows here. You have your allergen statement, which is going to look exactly like the recipes allergen statement window. So you got the finished allergen statement. You got the spreadsheet that shows all of the allergens for each individual ingredient you've added in, and then the allergens that actually exist within the composite ingredient. And then a spreadsheet report, which will simply show us the totals, or the averages, sorry, for each individual ingredient. Expand that out a little bit more. So you can see basically the percentages. So the calories for the individual items are going to be, if the bun has originally around 220 calories, as this one has right around that range, it's going to be 20% of that that's going to show in our spreadsheet report. So it's going to be the cut down percentage to how much it's actually applying to the finished composite ingredient. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the last part of this item here that we'll mention is with all of the types of items we have inside of Genesis, you have the different colors. You know, with dark green items, it's user created ingredients. ESHA ingredients are lighter green. Purple would be recipes. And you see up on this top line here, this is kind of a light blue here. And that's what all of your composite ingredients are going to come up as. And so if I go over into now, save this item as webinar composite. I'm going to open up an existing recipe that I've got that I'm going to use for a couple other demonstrations here, and just search for that webinar item. We'll find, of course, all of the buns that I created that were ingredients, but I've also got this webinar composite. So that light blue item is our composite that we just created a couple seconds ago. I'm going to select that item and add it into our, say 50 grams, add it into our recipe. So now I've got that item in our recipe. And when we see it inside of a recipe, it will look kind of like how a sub recipe would look, where you have the plus button next to it and you can expand that out. So it's really kind of all the pieces down to what we've seen for our composite ingredients we've built so far.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for explaining the color codes again. That's just a good reminder because folks see those in the software and they actually do have meaning. You can change those color settings, but those are the defaults that Genesis comes with and they're there to help you. Thanks. So the next new item we'll show you is the menu label with calorie ranges. For menu labeling purposes in some circumstances, like when you have menu items in 3 or more sizes or flavor varieties or combo meals that offer variations, you can list calories as a range on your menu. This has been added to Genesis and the menu label features. So within the menu label report, which as Ben mentioned was previously called the food menu report, but now it's the menu label report, you can see a range for calories. As you select several items to include in your menu label, the least and greatest calories are listed as a range. And we'll be covering these again in more detail in the next webinar, but Ben, can you show us those as well?
Absolutely, and this will be fairly quick because there's not too much to show here, but I'll go ahead and close this recipe now that we'll get back to in a few minutes. I'm going to open an existing menu that I've created in the past. Got my boss Chris's menu that he created. And so within our menu now, if I expand this over a little bit here, you'll notice that within the areas that show the categories, you know, the side, the chicken dinner, all of those will now have that parenthetical calorie range. You can show or hide that if you would like, and that's going to be based on the individual categories. So if we go to this category, we right click on it, we can choose modify. Previously, the only option you would have would be to rename the category within the food menu. Now we've got this checkbox that says show calorie ranges or not. So if I uncheck that, then this menu, expand that back over again, this menu, the side option 3 that I just had, hides that calorie range. The rest of them are now showing. And those ranges will show up on the reports as well. So we've got the menu label report, and that's going to show the calorie ranges inside of that too. And then also for our standard nutrient report, which is a new report. I don't think we've talked about that yet, but it's really basically the same thing as the food menu report. We've just kind of stripped out the coloring and the icons and things like that to be a little bit more designed to export out. You know, you don't want the icons and things like that when you actually put that report or that menu on your reader board or wherever you're taking it to. So we've kind of simplified that report a bit, but with these reports, you'll see those calorie ranges as well.
Thank you. So we will jump into a little bit of Mexico front of pack or Mexico related regulations. So new to Genesis 11.5 is Mexico front of pack labeling. It's a series of icons that's designed to appear on the front of a package, just like it's named. If you have the Mexico labeling module for Genesis, the Mexico front of pack options will also be available to you. If you don't have Mexico labeling module for Genesis, contact our sales team. They can provide you with pricing and availability. Genesis 11.5 includes the front of pack icons and the features to report the proper Mexico front of pack information. And we'll have a separate webinar that covers much more detail regarding the bigger picture of Mexico labeling options and the front of pack settings. The front of pack labeling is mandatory in Mexico for most prepackaged foods and non-alcoholic beverages. It highlights energy and a few other nutrients. The front of pack icons available in Genesis are per Mexico's labeling regulations, and the icons are for small packages. As you see here on the slide, the lone icon that's a little larger that just states energy. That's for small packages. We have the individual packages icon, family packages that you can list per package, and family packages per portion. The 11.5 version also includes Mexico nutrient content claims. So again, these are per Mexico regulations and based on the claims that you can make. The Mexico labeling module in Genesis includes the nutrient content claims, much like you would experience with other countries. So it's helping to qualify and identify those claims that your product is eligible to make. So you'll see there on the slide, you have the red, no circle slash indicates that claim is not eligible. But if there is one that's in green, then that would be a claim that you would be able to make on a package. Whether you do so or not is up to you, but Genesis just informs you that you could make it based on the nutritional content that you're seeing. And then reference amounts for nutrient content claims, not just for Mexico, but for all of our nutrient content claims sections for US, Mexico, and Canada. They're based on a food reference amount, and for US labels, we're familiar with the reference amounts customly consumed list, or the RAC. Mexico provides lists of portions of food and non-alcoholic beverages from NOM 86, and Canada uses the table of reference amounts for foods. You use these food reference amounts to base your serving sizes, and nutrient content claims are also based on these reference amounts. When you select the claims features in Genesis, Genesis will then prompt you to indicate a reference amount in order to identify eligible claims more easily and accurately. You can use the serving size that you set for your recipe, or you can manually enter a reference amount. In some cases, your serving size may be equal to the government-defined food reference amount. However, sometimes your serving size may not be exactly equal to the reference amount. As you determine your serving sizes, they're based on how you make your product, not necessarily exact to the RAC or to the other country's reference amounts. Previously, if these differed in Genesis, you might have to change your recipe serving size to the correct reference amount, review your eligible nutrient content claims, and then revert back to the recipe serving size that you actually wanted. And this new feature makes the nutrient content claims review easier. Ben, can you show us all of those, the Mexico features and the reference amounts, please?
Absolutely, and I might go a little bit or a different order than Alicia did. I think I'm probably going to go front of pack, then reference amounts, then Mexico nutrient content claims, but that's just because I have to get through the reference amount to get into the Mexico claims. So we'll go ahead and reopen our Genesis software here. I'm going to go close my menu label. And then I'm going to open up a existing recipe that I have inside. That's my webinar example recipe that if you've watched many of these webinars, you've probably seen more than once before. So first off, we're going to take a look at the front of package. Front of package is a new icon right next to the barcode. So it's going to be inside of this label section of the recipe ribbon or recipe tab. So if you click on recipe here, you'll see front of pack right over here. It's only going to be available for the Mexico module. Alicia mentioned that. So if you have a label being created for Canada, for United States, for Europe, as you can see with my recipe I've got here, it is going to be my label display wants to pop open, is going to be a US label. And so being a US label, it doesn't have the ability to do that front of package at this time. But if I go over into edit label, change this over to Mexico, hit OK. Now label changes and front of package lights up. So we can now go into that front of package area. If we click on front of package, we'll have all of the different options for this. Show you a few things here, but as Alicia mentioned, we're going to have a deep dive into a lot of this information in our next webinar. So really just here to kind of show you where things are more than the full depth of every bit of this feature. So with the very top area here, you have select your format. So we can click on this and you've got as Alicia said, family package per portion, family package per package. And if we slide up here, then we have the individual package and small package as well. So we just click on the ones that we'd like to use and it will select that. And then the options down below will change based on which one we have selected. So if we do small package, it's going to have a shorter list of options because it has a lot less options that can happen. If we choose the proportion, then we've got a few more. And these you can just expand out to change things like the font size, style, bolding it if you want to, number of servings. So a lot of this information, again, I'm not going to go through every little bit of this today because there's a lot of information here that we'll probably dive a bit more into during that Mexico specific webinar in a couple weeks. And moving over into the nutrient content claims section now. If we click on claims, you'll pull open this window now that says reference amount not set. This should happen for every recipe you have now because it wants to specify that. If you want your reference amount to be the serving of the recipe, you simply click set, and that will set it as the serving size. I'm sorry, not set, use existing. If you click on use existing, then it will use a serving size. Sorry about that misinformation. Or if you click on set, it'll pull open a new window, and then you can type in whatever you like, whether it's 100 grams or 50 grams or 2 ounces or whatever your item might be. You can select any of that information. If we hit OK, we'll then pull back open. We'll have to click back over to our claims to actually open that up. If you ever get to the point where you click on claims and it pulls that open and you're not sure what your reference amount is, you can also modify that directly from the edit recipe window. So we click on edit recipe now. Reference amount is now between preparation method and the nutrient content claims tabs within the edit recipe window. That's a new spot that's there. It'll specify what reference it's saying. So for this text, it says in Mexico. So we know we're making a Mexican label, and reference amount for Mexico specifically. These do change based on the countries too, as Alicia mentioned. So the reference amount in Mexico probably isn't the exact same as the reference amount in the United States for that specific type of product. Same thing goes with Genesis. If I was to change my label back to a US 2016 label, hit OK. Sorry, my computer's running a little bit slow today. We click on claims, it's going to pull open that reference amount not set again because we have a reference amount set for Mexico currently, but we don't have one for the United States set currently. So again, we could use existing to use that serving size or set it to set whatever we'd like. And that does get stored in the database for each country. So if I set one for Mexico, switch it to the United States, set one for the United States, switch back to Mexico, it's going to remember what we selected for Mexico. So you don't have to worry about if you change the country, it's going to lose that information. It keeps it for each specific country. But do note you have to set one for each individual country for each product that you're creating. And then going over into the Mexican nutrient content claims. As Alicia said, this is going to be basically exactly the same as you're used to for the US or Canadian nutrient content claims. So you expand out which one you'd like to make. I'm only eligible to make a cholesterol claim for my product that I've made. I don't have enough fiber or calories in too much of the other items, but if we expand out these items, it'll then say exactly what our qualifying condition is. I can't make a fiber claim because I only have 1 gram and needs to contain 3 grams or more fiber per serving to make that statement. So again, expand out these the specific nutrients to see a bit more information on the individual claims. And then you can expand out the qualifying condition to know a bit more about the exact claim and how you can get to that point where you can make that claim for that specific product. And again, just like that set reference amount, the claims are different for each country. So if I select a sugar-free claim for this recipe in Mexico and then move to a US, change it to a US label, we're gonna have to reset those claims again. So note that those don't cross over because the claims are so drastically different for each country.
Thanks, Ben. A lot of great information. And again, we'll display and demonstrate more of these features at another webinar, but it's good to know they're available now. And here's a quick look at how you can use them and give those some thought. So then a couple other maybe perceived as minor features, but still important, and some of them especially appreciated. We have the less than 2% ingredient statement. Before, the less than 2% ingredient statement, or the less than 2% statement within your ingredient statement, was by default listed alphabetically. So if you selected that feature in Genesis, all of those ingredients following your less than 2%, contains less than 2% of, you can see in bold there on the slide, those would be in alphabetical order. Now Genesis allows you to list those in order of predominance by weight. So it just continues on that full predominance by weight ingredient statement from complete start to finish, but you can still include that contains less than 2% of statement within your ingredient statement. It just gives you a little more flexibility as to how that information is displayed. And sugar alcohols, now with Genesis 11.5, you can list the specific sugar alcohol listed on your nutrition facts label. For US and Canadian labeling, if you have only one type of sugar alcohol present in your formula and the amount is declared on the nutrition label, then you can choose to list the specific sugar alcohol. If you do have more than one type of sugar alcohol present in your formula, then you have to use the more generic term of sugar alcohols for you, or sugar alcohol for US, as sugar alcohols, polyols, or other forms of those terms for Canadian labels. But again, Genesis 11.5 gives you the option to do either and list that specific sugar alcohol. And the eLearning Center, we presented that or mentioned it in previous webinars, but now Genesis has a quick click option. There's a button right in Genesis, so you can just access the eLearning page on the ESHA website from within Genesis. It's just helpful, you're thinking of something or need a quick reference, when you have Genesis open, just quickly click to the eLearning Center. And Ben, can you show those, please?
Absolutely. So let's go over back into Genesis now. So for the first one was the ingredient statement less than 2%. That's going to be right next to where you could do the 2% statement already. So if we go to edit label within our recipe and go to the format options, we have the ingredient statement insert contains less than 2% checkbox. We also have contains less than 2% sorted by predominance. So if we check on this one, we can then hit OK, and we'll see our ingredient statement. I think I've got a handful of items. Maybe I don't. There we go. Contains less than 2% of a handful of items there. And then if I go to edit, check on contains less than 2% sorted by order of predominance in the format options tab. It will then reorganize those by weight instead of by alphabetical order. And then the sugar alcohol section is going to be under the nutrient options area. So specifically under sugar alcohols, if I can find it down here, sugar alcohol. We now just simply have English specific sugar alcohol name. So if you have nothing inside of this window here, it will just be displayed as whatever it says to display it as here. Or if we choose something like sorbitol, and then do a voluntary nutrient as our sugar alcohol. You of course have to make sure that the voluntary nutrient is checked off for it to show up on your label at all, but now we've got it shown as sorbitol. If we wanted to change that back to just generically sugar alcohol, you just go in, delete that back out, hit OK, and it'll change us right back to just the standard sugar alcohol. And then as Alicia said, the last piece that we've got that we added in that I know our marketing team is really excited about is we've got our eLearning Center button. That's going to be on the Home tab of Genesis. If you click on Home here, just where you can do opening and saving, things like that, or the preferences of the software, we have our eLearning Center button right here. And if I click on that, it just opens up my web browser. And then pulls open the ESHA website right into the eLearning Center. And if you go into your Genesis software and you're looking for this specific webinar, within the next couple of hours, that should be the first thing that pops open here because it shows it within sorted by date, newest to oldest by default, I believe. So you'll see that pretty soon here as soon as we're done today. And you can search for any other items, tutorials, webinars, ebooks, cheat sheets, all of that sort of information right here at your fingertips, straight out of the ESHA Genesis software. So you have to go around searching for it.
Perfect, thank you. And just a note again on the eLearning Center that the tutorials are brief feature highlights, so they're just a couple minutes long. The webinars, like you're attending today, typically a 45-minute to an hour presentation. And then we have ebooks that really cover in more depth. Often they're regulatory driven, or when menu labeling came out, how's the regulations, and then examples of what Genesis might be able to provide, examples of the nutrient information, how it's presented, and features within Genesis. And then our cheat sheets are just one page, typically one-page sheets that give you information on particular topics like nutrient conversions or the latest daily value lists. So thanks again, Ben. And then again, just a reminder, we mentioned these already, but just want to know what's coming up in June. So composite ingredients and calorie ranges we'll cover in more detail, and complying with Mexico food labeling in the front of pack. We'll address those in June. And if you or any of your team members need more in-depth hands-on training with Genesis, we have several summer sessions on the calendar. We have professional and advanced classes in June and July at our Oak Brook location. And we also have a professional training in August in Orlando. You can visit the ESHA website news and events page for more information and to register for these. And if you need to reach us about your account for support, any other questions, you can call or email us and use these contacts to get a hold of us. You can also connect with other ESHA users via our LinkedIn community and stay up to date on all things ESHA, as well as industry and labeling news with the ESHA blog and newsletter. So we'll move over to some Q&A topics that came in. The first question, Ben, how do I know what version I have, and what should I do if I have an earlier version of Genesis installed?
Absolutely. So within the software, right next to that eLearning Center, we have the About button in Genesis on the Home tab. If you click on About, and I'm not going to right now, but if you click on About, you'll see what version you're currently running, your database version, your serial code and your customer number, and that's why I'm not going to open mine, is because it'll show my serial code, how many licenses you have, all of that sort of information. So really everything about your account that you would need to know would be right there. In terms of updating, if you currently have your maintenance and support package up to date, then you're eligible for those updates, and you should get an update email. Everyone that's in the account should get an email. The shipping contact would get the actual download link. Any users that are not considered the installation people for the account would get a update that just says the update's available and here's what's happening. So everyone should get some sort of update. And then if you're behind on updates, if you're getting behind and finding it difficult to get your application up to date, the cloud version of Genesis is always up to date. So when that was released a couple weeks ago, all of our cloud users logged in the next day and were using the newest version automatically. Nothing they had to worry about. They didn't have to go and bug their IT teams or anything like that. So really makes the transition very easy and quick and simple. And then one thing I was going to point out for the training that we have going on, the July training is the day after the IFT trade show. So if you're going to IFT, it's a great way to bundle it so you can cut down on some travel costs.
Good point. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, we have a couple questions. I'll take the next two. One is, will you add the front of pack for U.S. label features? And I think Ben touched on this, that only Mexico is available right now. And we obviously monitor FDA regulation developments, but we do also keep an eye on industry practices. So in the U.S. front of pack labeling, like the Facts Up Front program, is an industry standard and an allowed voluntary program, but it's not necessarily overseen by the FDA. So it's not final rule or what we see with other regulation, but we will keep an eye on that and keep your priority support, or your software support and maintenance current. So any new features that come along, you're well aware of and receive the appropriate updates. And then the next question that was, can I use 100 grams from my reference amount for nutrient content claims? And again, so regulation for US, Mexico, and Canada all bases off those reference amounts. So if you happen to make a product, your food reference amount size is 100 grams, then that's in line. But otherwise, you want to refer to the appropriate country's list of reference amounts and work off of those serving size or those reference amounts to see which claims are eligible for your products. Another question that came in is, what if my supplier is a less than $10 million a year company, but I am a greater than $10 million annual food sales company? I have to comply now, but my supplier might have that extra year. And yeah, that can be a tricky situation. And so you just want to communicate with your suppliers and make sure they know that their information supports your labels. We're all trying our best to comply with the appropriate regulations. And so just communicate with them. Let them know that you need this information and make sure that everyone's aware of the deadlines, the compliance dates. Question for Ben. The user code for the composite ingredient. So can you just talk about how does the user code for ingredients, the individual ingredients, versus the user code for the composite ingredient? Do the individuals carry forward, or is it just one user code for the composite ingredient?
It's just one. So there's, user code throughout the entire application is a unique field no matter what. Only one can be used. A recipe and an ingredient can't even have the same user code. They're all unique across the board, and so composite ingredients can be looked at the same way. If you have 4 or 5 ingredients that you're putting into a composite, that composite would need its own unique user code outside of one of the ones that's used for any of those ingredients at all.
Okay, thanks. And then kind of a similar, the reference amount, will it save across other recipes? Will it apply to other recipes or just that recipe?
It's just the one recipe. So if you have 100 recipes and you've got a couple of different countries, each one of those is completely separate from each other. They're not going to pull through because, of course, if you have one recipe and then a second recipe, it may be the same type of food, it may be the same rack, but it may also be a completely different type of item. So we don't want to make too many assumptions there on what you're making. So those are all going to be separate. So it might be a little bit of, maybe a little bit of upfront work, or at least upfront, you're getting some prompts as you're working forward with the new update. But as you move forward, as you use those recipes more and more, you should have those set as you're making the recipes. So, maybe a little more work than normal, but a small amount more with update, and then moving forward should be easing off with that.
Thanks. And one last question, the menu label report, will it present unrounded calories and ranges for other nutrients?
Absolutely. And so if we go back over into Genesis, let me open back up my menu label one more time. sorry, my menu label. I'm getting thrown off on the name of it. On the menu label report, not the standard nutrient report. Standard nutrient report is really hard-coded at this point of exactly what it's going to show. But with the menu label report here, if you have the label nutrients only checked, it's going to show the nutrients that are required for the menu labeling restaurant laws. But if you uncheck that box, then it's going to show the nutrients for that you have selected in your nutrients to view. So whatever nutrients I've selected here, I have 2016 US with ash and water and cost. If I slide over here, I now see cost, ash, water, all of the other nutrients that are mandatory nutrients for a US label. So we can switch back and forth between either the menu label nutrients that are specific to that, or whatever my nutrients to view are selected by that label nutrients only checkbox.
Okay, thanks. And then again, just if you noticed on the screen, the ranges is for the calories, but the other nutrients reported are the actual amounts for that serving. And then there was one more question. Someone just asked, you missed the 2% statement, what changed or got added? And so again, with the less than 2% statement in the ingredient statement, it was the addition of listing those ingredients following the less than 2% statement by weight. So in order predominance by weight rather than alphabetical. Before it used to be listed only alphabetically, and now you can choose to list either alphabetically or by predominance by weight. So that, Ben has one more thing.
I was going to mention one thing as you were going through the question for the front of pack for US. For something like that, and for a lot of things, let us know if it's something that you would want or need or not. We love feedback. Our developers and our managers love to develop things based on what people will actually use, and without feedback from our users, it's hard to know. So if that's something that you would like, or if there's any other major feature that you'd like to see, send a quick email to just support@esha.com or sales@esha.com, and we can just note that down. We have an idea portal internally at ESHA that we use, so note that down that more people ask for it, and if we have 100 people that ask for the same thing, there's a better chance than if 5 people ask for it.
Thanks so much. So that concludes our questions and answers in our webinar. Again, there will be a recording that comes out later today. And again, the ESHA blog, recent ESHA blog, highlighted all of these and explains in a bit more detail each of the features. So be sure and look for the blog, articles, newsletters, and thanks for joining us today.